Apparently, Rimuru Tempest reads from the Kakashi Book of Teaching because he just loves beating the shit out of his students. Greetings, my friends, it's slime time, which means it's time to take a look at another episode of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Here's that preemptive spoiler warning if you haven't watched this week's episode. Let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a warning. This is going to be a very rapid-paced, super fast review because I'm very short on time, but I really wanted to give my thoughts about this episode. And honestly, I'm loving this story arc right here, mostly for how incredibly different it is. Rimuru Tempest is officially a teacher. He's taking on Shizu's will of being able to look after these students and find a way to save them from all of the power which is eventually going to consume their body. And this episode mostly served the purpose of introducing each and every one of these students, showing us their personalities and what sort of powers that they actually have. And while they are filled to the brim with tons of magical power, they're nowhere near as strong as Rimuru, or at least they don't quite know how to channel that power yet. And this episode was really great as Rimuru threw them to the school of hard knocks. I especially loved how at the very beginning of the episode, none of them respect him at all. They give him the cold shoulder, they pretend he doesn't exist, until he decides to bring out Ranga, who decides to put on his snarling face and scare the shit out of these children, which is really damned funny. After that, they have a big training session where he really wants to see how powerful they are, but it's also a ploy to try and see if he can actually waste some of their power and deplete it so eventually they'll be able to live even longer. It's basically a part of his plan to actually save these kids, but it's also a way to sort of bond with every single one of them. So let me just give my thoughts on each of them right now. First, there is Kenya, who seems like he's kind of like the alpha male of the group. He's loud, he's boisterous, he seems like he would be the character of any other shonen series, and he's got a lot of energy and he has a sword which can spew fire very much like Shizu. Of course, he ends up getting beaten. The exact opposite of him is a character by the name of Ryota, who at first comes across as very timid and calm, until suddenly he reveals his powers to basically transform into a massive monster version of himself who goes on a berserker rampage. Again, Rimuru Tempest just makes a fool out of him. One of the more interesting members is Chloe Aubert, who has the ability to essentially use water-style techniques. Very similar to Rimuru, she actually ends up trapping him in this massive ball of water which is filled with all of these blades, which he casually walks through. I really like her character. She seems to take to Rimuru the most, even actually like smiling a little bit when she gets pat on the head, although I have to admit that smile is kind of creepy as well. We also have Gale Gibson, who has the ability to essentially just fire like ki blasts, like a character in Dragon Ball, like he's able to take energy and shoot them like bullets. It's probably the least impressive of the group, but still, I can't wait to see what he's going to be capable of as the series goes on. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Alice Rondo, who is definitely the spunkiest member of the group, and she has this like puppeteer ability where she summons stuffed animals to fight against Rimuru, in what might be one of the most unexciting fight scenes I've ever seen. However, Rimuru sees a lot of promise in her abilities. While she is using stuffed animals in this battle, she has the potential to use massive armored weapons, which could be, of course, very destructive. So all these students end up getting their asses kicked, but Rimuru makes it clear that he is there not just to teach them, but to actually save them. He reveals the mask that Shizu gave them, and this is when they finally start to appreciate him a little bit and realize he's not such a bad guy. And we get to see that time passes, he starts to bond with them a little bit more, and he's trying to come up with another plan in order to help them, and he actually seeks out the sage wisdom of Trainee, where he's trying to find these spirits which are somehow going to allow him to save these students. And these spirits are very secretive, there's really difficult to find, and even Trainee doesn't necessarily know how to find them, and this is clearly going to end up being one of the biggest parts of this arc right here, as it's built up at the end of the episode when he actually finds out where they live. More on that later. One of the scenes that's really interesting about this episode, which is kind of random, but I'm sure it's going to have more meaning behind it later, is when he's just having a casual picnic with his students, Rimuru and all of the kids. They have another training session, and of course they get their asses spanked, but suddenly this like weird dragon starts to attack Ingracia, which has a really gnarly design to it. It's real sharp and destructive and has these giant powerful lightning attacks, and it's about to attack these two guys who are entering the village, who one of them I swear looks just like Guile from Street Fighter, but that's when Rimuru comes in, transforming slightly differently as to not cause any attention to himself, and single-handedly takes out this monster. And I love the animation during the scene, because we've seen where he's able to use that like vortex of black magic which can absorb things, but I love how in this episode it's actually drawn as like a giant hand that's grabbing all of the energy tree before he pulls it back for himself. Visually, it looks really freaking awesome, and even though the scene did reuse some animation of the dragon attacking, it was really exciting. But he ends up saving this one guy who's, again, going to be another important ally for his village, this guy who is a merchant and a loan shark, and he also happens to have a lot of information about the world, something that would be really useful to Rimuru, and they decide to, again, work together. But inadvertently, one of his assistants, this very beautiful lady, just so happens to be from this village, which is right next to where all of these, like, creatures are that Rimuru is looking for, which are going to be instrumental in saving these children, and thus a brand new adventure begins. So what's the rundown on this episode of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime? This was a really fun episode and a great introduction to all of these young students. I really cannot wait to see them grow as the series goes on, as I really hope they're actually going to be mainstays for the show. The episode did a great job of showing off all of their distinctive personalities, but I still feel there's going to be a lot more room for development for all these characters. And I'm kind of shocked that, again, they just decided to introduce a whole new gaggle of characters because, wow, Slime is filled with so many people, and it just shows, like, how they're not afraid to overload the viewer. But the good thing is every single character manages to be interesting and more different and enduring than the last, and this could not be more evident than in this arc right here. This group of young kids who ultimately you find yourself being very sympathetic for because they were summoned to this world not of their own will, and they could potentially die from all of the raw power which is inside of their body. Rimuru was also really funny in this episode, really trying to be top dog, and usually it works with everyone else, like whether it be the monsters, the Kijin, the goblins, any sort of giant beast that he runs into, they end up bowing to him and respecting him ultimately. But these kids, they just don't see that. They just see another annoying teacher, and it takes a lot for him to actually, like, rein them in a little bit, and that leads to a lot of humor in this episode, which I really loved. And visually, I loved that scene of the dragon just attacking. I love the look of the monsters in this series. They're so damned cool. And while that scene was brief, it was really exciting, and it was a sort of a great springboard for the next part of the series. I especially loved Ranga in this episode. I love now that he's just like a massive like beast, but he still has the tendencies of like someone's pet. There's a great scene in the middle of the episode that like segues into the second half where he's just panting like crazy and wagging his tail, but then there are moments where he can just be like a giant snarling beast of destruction. It's a great juxtaposition, and again reminds me that he's one of my favorite characters from the show, and damn it, if they make a plushie of this character, I must have it. So let's go ahead and wrap this one up. I said this was going to be a short review. It's actually not. It's just a normal one. Still, I loved this episode right here, which is why I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5, even with some of the faults, some of the reused animation, and the fact that the animation was not the best at times. I'm really loving where the story is going right here. It's managing to be really enduring, and it excites me to see where these kids are going to go and how they're going to play a plot later on in the series. And I can't wait to see how this entire season is going to wrap up, because we're actually getting kind of close. I can't wait to see this brand new place that they're going to, and I can only imagine that Rimuru is going to get even more companions. So there it is. That's my thoughts on the episode. 5 out of 5 from me. I'd love to get your thoughts on the episode. You can tell me all of them in the comment section below, and what you hope to see from the rest of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Thank you all for watching this review. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down, baby.